The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, first published in 1890, is a Gothic novel about beauty, morality, and the corrupting influence of unchecked desire. The story follows Dorian Gray, a remarkably handsome young man whose portrait mysteriously ages and reflects the consequences of his actions, while Dorian himself remains outwardly young and beautiful. Wilde's literary style combines Gothic fiction, psychological drama, sharp wit, symbolism, and the aesthetic philosophy of the late 19th century. His elegant prose and memorable dialogue contrast beauty and sophistication with the increasingly dark consequences of Dorian's choices. The novel explores themes of vanity, corruption, morality, influence, pleasure, conscience, appearance versus reality, and the conflict between art and life. The Picture of Dorian Gray remains important for its provocative examination of a life devoted entirely to beauty and pleasure, and its enduring question of what happens when a person attempts to escape the moral consequences of his own actions. The story starts with the painter Basil Hallward in his London studio, showing his friend Lord Henry Wotton a portrait of an extraordinarily beautiful young man named Dorian Gray. Lord Henry thinks the painting is Basil's greatest work and urges him to exhibit it, but Basil refuses. He admits that the portrait reveals too much of his own worshipful fascination with Dorian. To Basil, Dorian is more than a model. He has become the center of his artistic imagination. Lord Henry becomes intrigued before he even meets Dorian. Basil warns him not to influence the young man, insisting that Dorian is innocent, impressionable, and too beautiful to be safely exposed to Lord Henry's cynical ideas. But when Dorian arrives, Lord Henry stays anyway. As Basil finishes the portrait, Lord Henry speaks to Dorian about youth, pleasure, and the importance of living for oneself. He tells Dorian that beauty will fade and that youth must be spent chasing intense experiences before time steals it away. When Dorian sees the completed portrait, Lord Henry's words strike him with painful force. The painting will stay young, while he will age, and lose the beauty that suddenly seems like the only thing worth having. In a desperate moment, Dorian wishes the situation could be reversed. He would remain young, and the portrait would bear age and corruption for him. Basil senses the danger in Dorian's reaction and nearly destroys the painting, but Dorian stops him. Basil gives him the portrait, and Dorian leaves with Lord Henry, already drawn into his influence. Lord Henry soon learns more about Dorian's background. Dorian's mother was a noblewoman who married a poor soldier against her father's wishes. Her father arranged the soldier's death, and she died soon after giving birth to Dorian. This tragic history makes Dorian even more fascinating to Lord Henry, who begins to see the young man as someone he can shape. At a dinner hosted by Lady Agatha, Lord Henry dazzles the guests with clever, selfish ideas about pleasure and beauty. Dorian is especially captivated and chooses Lord Henry's company over Basil's. A month later, Dorian tells Lord Henry that he has fallen in love with Sybil Vane, a young actress in a poor London theatre. He first saw her while exploring the city's rougher districts under the influence of Lord Henry's advice to experience life. To Dorian, Sybil's performances make her seem like the greatest actress alive. Sybil, in turn, sees Dorian as a romantic ideal and calls him Prince Charming. Dorian becomes so enchanted that he sends Lord Henry a telegram announcing his engagement to her. Sybil is overjoyed, but her family is uneasy. Her mother sees Dorian's wealth as an opportunity, while her brother James distrusts him. James is about to leave for Australia, and before he goes, he warns Sybil that if her mysterious gentleman ever harms her, he will return and kill him. Sybil ignores the warning because she is completely absorbed in her love. Dorian takes Lord Henry and Basil to see Sybil perform. Basil is prepared to support the marriage because Dorian seems sincerely in love. But that night, Sybil acts terribly. Dorian is humiliated and confused. After the performance, Sybil explains that real love has made the stage feel false to her. She no longer wants to pretend to feel emotions because she now feels love for Dorian in life. Instead of understanding her, Dorian turns cruel. He realizes that he loved her art, not Sybil herself, and rejects her coldly. After wandering London through the night, Dorian returns home and notices something impossible. The face in Basil's portrait has changed. A faint expression of cruelty has appeared around the mouth. Dorian remembers his wish and understands that the painting may now be carrying the marks of his soul. Ashamed of how he treated Sybil, he decides to apologize in the morning. But the next day, Lord Henry arrives with news that Sybil has killed herself. Dorian is stunned. Yet Lord Henry quickly reshapes the tragedy into something aesthetic and dramatic, persuading him not to drown himself in guilt. Dorian lets himself be convinced. Instead of confessing his cruelty or mourning deeply, he goes with Lord Henry to the opera. From this point on, he chooses a life of sensation and secrecy, knowing that the portrait, not his own face, will reveal the cost. Basil visits Dorian to offer sympathy, but he is horrified by Dorian's coldness about Sybil's death. Dorian speaks in the polished, detached language of Lord Henry, treating Sybil almost like a beautiful artistic episode rather than a real dead woman. When Basil asks to exhibit the portrait, Dorian panics. He refuses and becomes fiercely protective of the painting. Once Basil leaves, Dorian decides the portrait must be hidden. He has the painting moved to an unused schoolroom at the top of the house and locks it away. Then he begins reading a strange yellow book sent by Lord Henry. The book, with its intoxicating focus on sensation and decadence, grips him deeply. Over the years, it becomes a kind of guide for his life. Dorian remains outwardly young and beautiful, but rumors gather around him. Friendships end badly, reputations are ruined, and whispers of corruption follow him everywhere. Still, people struggle to believe the stories because his face remains pure and untouched. Dorian studies rare pleasures, beautiful objects, perfumes, music, jewels, fabrics, and strange ideas. Sometimes he is horrified by the portrait, which grows older and uglier with every sin. At other times, he delights in the fact that his body remains safe while the image suffers for him. The hidden painting becomes both his secret and his conscience. On the eve of Dorian's 38th birthday, Basil meets him in the fog and walks home with him. Basil is about to leave for Paris, but first he warns Dorian about the terrible rumors surrounding his life. He insists that sin eventually shows itself, and says he wishes he could see Dorian's soul. Dorian bitterly tells him that he can. He leads Basil upstairs and reveals the portrait. Basil is horrified. The painting is now grotesque, twisted by vice and age, yet still recognizably his own work. He realizes that something supernatural and terrible has happened. Basil begs Dorian to pray for forgiveness, but Dorian feels only rage and hatred. In a sudden act of violence, he grabs a knife and murders Basil. Afterward, he hides Basil's belongings and carefully creates the impression that Basil left the house alive. The next morning, Dorian summons Alan Campbell, a former close friend and scientist. He tells Campbell there is a dead body upstairs and demands that he destroy it through chemistry. Campbell refuses until Dorian blackmails him with a secret from his past. Forced into obedience, Campbell dissolves Basil's body with acid. When Dorian later enters the room, the corpse is gone, but the portrait has changed again. One of its hands appears stained with blood. That evening, Dorian attends a dinner party and performs the role of charming society gentleman, though he can barely hold himself together. Lord Henry notices his strange mood, especially when he asks where Dorian was the night before. Dorian leaves early, burns Basil's belongings, and seeks escape in an opium den, trying to forget what he has done. In the opium den, Dorian sees Adrian Singleton, one of the young men whose life he has helped ruin. As he leaves, a woman calls him Prince Charming. The name reaches James Vane, Sybil's brother, who has spent years searching for the man responsible for her death. James follows Dorian and threatens him at gunpoint. Dorian saves himself by pointing out that Sybil died 18 years earlier, while he still looks like a man of 20. James lets him go, but later learns from the woman that Dorian has not aged in all those years. Realizing he has been tricked, James resumes the hunt. A week later, Dorian hosts guests at his country estate Selby. During a conversation about beauty and love, he suddenly sees James Vane's face at the window and faints. For days afterward, he is terrified, wondering whether James is truly there or whether guilt has turned into hallucination. When he finally joins a shooting party, a hunter accidentally kills a man hidden in the brush. Dorian fears it is a bad omen. Later, he learns the dead man is an unknown sailor. When he sees the body and recognizes James Vane, he feels safe again. Some weeks later, Dorian tells Lord Henry that he wants to become good. He claims he has begun by sparing an innocent country girl instead of seducing her. Lord Henry mocks the idea of reform and shifts the conversation to Alan Campbell's suicide and Basil's disappearance. Dorian asks what Lord Henry would say if he admitted to murdering Basil, but Lord Henry laughs it off, insisting that murder is too crude for someone like Dorian. When Lord Henry casually quotes a line about gaining the world and losing one's soul, Dorian is shaken. Lord Henry does not understand why. That night, Dorian goes to look at the portrait, hoping that his decision to act better has improved it. Instead, the painting looks even worse. Its expression suggests hypocrisy, as if his supposed reform is only another form of vanity. Dorian realizes he has not truly repented. He has only wanted to feel innocent without facing the depth of his guilt. In fury, he takes the same knife he used to kill Basil and stabs the portrait, trying to destroy the evidence of his soul. A terrible cry rings through the house. When the servants break into the locked room, they find the portrait restored to its original beauty, showing Dorian Gray as young and flawless. On the floor lies the body of an old, withered, disfigured man with a knife in his heart. Only the rings on his hands allow them to recognize him as Dorian Gray. The bargain has ended, and the corruption hidden in the painting has returned to the man who created it.